All right, the next step is to make this a function. That way we can call it multiple times. So I'll call it when we need it. So first step is let's create a function, get student, and let's execute this code right here. Copy this code and put it there. And let me limit this just to 5 rows. So we can just see the 5 rows here. In fact, and I think once you do that, let's try now to execute that same code down here. And of course, it's not being executed because we're not actually calling the function. So let's do this. Let's do get student. Let's run it. There goes the first 5. Okay, good. And let's do, I want to run a test here, console log. And let's print out 2 of these arrows here. I'll do a 1 and a 2 just to show them. Okay. And let's run this again. And notice that you see these 2 lines being printed out before the data is being printed out. Okay. And the reason that's happening, of course, is because remember we talked about callbacks. And what's going to happen is this takes a little longer. This has to go outside of basically node.js and get data from a database. It doesn't know how long it's going to take, so it might take a few seconds, a few minutes. So what happens is this is making an asynchronous call. So even though this got executed first, it didn't finish first. This then went, and then when this completed, it actually displayed the information. Okay, so this took a while to do that. So we have to do something different. This function won't be able to return anything. We'll have to use that technique of doing a callback. Okay, but before we get to that, let's add a filter to this. I'll do get student. And what we're going to do here on this, we're going to create a variable called filter. Okay, and this just takes in a JSON object that represents access, that represents a query. So if I go here, put in a query and say here, where county is equal to Brooklyn, and this one I say where county is equal to Queens. Let's run it. Notice you got the 1 and 2 first, even though it's on the 3rd and 4th line of this execution process. And notice now we're getting, let's see, oh no, we wanted Brooklyn and Queens only. Okay, there goes Brooklyn, and Queens. In fact, so I can see this a little bit better, let's redirect this to a report.js. Let's look at the report.js. And again, notice that we first got the 1 and 2, and looks like we're getting all the data, so something's not right here. Oh, I passed in a filter here, but I forgot to actually put it as part of the query. So this actually needs the word filter. Let's save it. Now let's run it again. And now let's look at the report again one more time. There goes Brooklyn, Queens, and Queens. Okay, so now we actually have the data working. Okay, so we're able to call this function twice or 3 times. Again, let me add one more. Let's display Bronx. run it again. And now we should see data from Brooklyn, Bronx, and Queens. Okay. Now, the problem with this is because right now this data is not accessible by the outside world, meaning that this data that we're printing out to the console, I need to make this available to the web resource so I can do some sort of logic. So let's say I wanted to give the people in Bronx, let's say, an extra $20 because their commute is a little further. You know, let's say we have some sort of scholarship program. How would I be able to do that logic in here? Meaning that I don't want to touch this function. I should be able to modify the data outside of this function, because the only thing that this is supposed to do is get me data, and that's it. Nothing else, nothing more. Okay, so how do I access this data outside of the function? And that's what we're going to attack in the next session.